I'm here to talk about COVID-19, the pandemic, and its impact on journalism, but also on journalists, and how all this has played into the hands of politicians, how politicians are using it. So, like every panel, I'm not the one here to be a professor to tell you that information. Let me introduce to you my guest. I have with me Siddarth Varadarajan. He's the director of The Wire, an Indian digital news portal for independent journalism. He is also a recipient of DW's Freedom of Speech Award for outstanding commitment to human rights and freedom of expression in the media. Hello, Siddarth. Thank you for joining us. Can you give us a quick wave? Let's see if everything's okay.
Hi.
Okay, there you go. Nice smile to start with. But you weren't really smiling when you experienced something a while ago. I'm coming straight to that because you actually reported regarding COVID on a politician who violated the rules of COVID because he was involved in some sort of religious festival. Is that right?
Yes, I mean this goes back to the initial days of COVID and the reporting that. Let me just try to kill my.
We can see your every movement, so that's.
Yeah, I'm trying to kill the because I'm getting audio feedback.
Oh, okay.
Anyway. Okay.
Yes, so quickly, yeah, just take us to what the report was and really what happened after that.
Yeah, so this goes back to the first phase of COVID when the government announced a set of guidelines, a lockdown essentially, a national lockdown where they placed restrictions on activities that were allowed and that were not allowed, and religious functions and events were deemed as non-essential. And we wrote about a politician in Uttar Pradesh, the chief minister, who had taken part in a religious event with more than 100 people present, no social distancing, all for the benefit of his political agenda. And soon after we reported that story, we had trouble. I had trouble with the police from Uttar Pradesh, where they landed up at my house. With a summons that I accompanied them, questioning at a police station 900 miles away. This at a time when we are all meant to be in lockdown. There's not meant to be any interstate travel. And of course, what happened to me, I wasn't there at home, so nothing really happened. We were able to dodge that. But many reporters in different parts of India were less fortunate because when they did stories, honest, objective, factual accounts of the hardship that the lockdown was causing. And I have to remind viewers or participants in the DW Global Media Forum that India's lockdown was announced with barely 4 hours notice and with absolutely no planning on the part of the government. So there was chaos, there was uncertainty, there was fear of shortages, there was fear of unemployment.
Yeah.
And, literally millions of workers set out from big cities to head home because they weren't sure how they would look after themselves.
Exactly. So even to move this forward, sorry if anytime I get in to cut abruptly. So unfortunately, you got into some sort of trouble, you and your organization. That shouldn't have been the case because you were doing proper journalism. No one is above the law, right? But somehow it was almost an error for you to report on a politician violating the rules. And this is quite widespread, isn't it? During these COVID times, journalism is just not easy, is it?
It isn't because first of all, being factual is a challenge. Being able to move around at a time of lockdown is a privilege that journalists have because we were exempted from the rules of lockdown. But it was a difficult time for journalists to be out there reporting events and also looking after their own health. Right, this is a time of great fear and uncertainty. Everybody was panicking about the spread of COVID, and rightly so. So apart from the physical challenge, right, of being out there in the field, and as I said, I mean, mine is a very small example. There were literally dozens, hundreds of reporters here working for organizations large and small who placed themselves at risk by performing this task of informing the public. And if in addition to the threat to their health, they are going to end up being questioned by the police for they have done, showing up some inadequacy or the other in government functioning, then this is an added burden, isn't it? And it reflects very poorly on the state of media freedom when by the time the first phase of COVID ended, say by September or October, we had a list of something like 80 or 90 journalists across India who had been subjected to frivolous criminal cases of one kind or the other, all for reporting, objectively shortage of PPE equipment, or the shortage of or corruption in the allocation of food relief, or various other stories which showed the government in bad light.
Yeah.
So rather than looking at journalists as partners, right, and who can what's going wrong so that you can fix it, the knee-jerk reaction of mentions, unfortunately, was to look at our enemy.
Yeah.
And to say that, well, we aren't going to let you have the freedom to report things if you're going to show us in bad light.
Yet, we don't want to back down as journalists, right? Because now more than ever is when journalism should be at its professional best. This is when we actually have to put the political elites into check, right? We cannot back down.
Well, I feel very proud to be part of a fraternity that did precisely what you're saying. Despite this pressure, despite arrests and criminal cases being lodged, the fact is that reporters, and not just those who are connected to media organizations and have a certain level of protection, we saw reporters who are freelance, who had nobody looking over their shoulder, going out there, digging out details, reporting things, and persisting with the story. So that even when the government came to the conclusion that COVID is no longer much of a, and they dropped their guard, and the second phase of COVID, the second wave began in March. We've had reporters doing a lot of very courageous stories, highlighting the fact that the death toll from COVID, the official death toll is much lower than what in actuality is the case. And once again, being subjected to ridicule, taunts, and legal threats by politicians for doing their job.
So,
we've seen cases of,
So a while ago, quite recently actually, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres made this statement, said, pandemic cannot become a media extinction event. Now, of course, this encompassed a lot of things that were happening. There were a lot of journalists that were not having that freedom and that right to do their normal reporting. Of course, there was the issue of financing, where some media outlets just had to shut down because there was just not enough money coming through advertising, because we all know the lockdown really affected a lot of companies. So how do we, talking about solutions, because 30 minutes is really short time and we're almost sort of getting there, how do we survive? How does journalism survive, especially during an era of a pandemic like this?
Well, financial stresses are very objective problems, right? And the fact is that every sector of the economy has taken a hit. So it's not surprising that the media industry has come under pressure too. It's regrettable that well-heeled media organizations that have earned handsomely over the years and have a large war chest, which will allow them to withstand economic pressure, have been the first to look to make cutbacks and to sack people. This is unfortunate, but I understand there is pressure, and life is not made any easier by the fact that, in addition to the day-to-day financial difficulties of running media, you have to worry about legal costs, you have to worry about all kinds of pressures. So I think what we have a right to expect as journalists, as media owners, is that the government should, if it cannot facilitate media freedom, it should at least undertake not to curtail it, not to make our work harder, not to place restrictions on movement, on coverage, not to make access to information more difficult. One of the problems, I think Guterres or maybe UN has spoken about the problem of the pandemic of fake news. And the fact is that there's a lot of disinformation out there. And an important task of the media is also to dispel that disinformation. In India, regrettably, we've had ministers who have helped to peddle pseudoscientific solutions to the problem of COVID, misinformation on a mass scale about what kind of medication they can take, what kind of home remedies they can take, which is actually
And that's right. And that's right. You're very right. There's just so many bombardment of different challenges from all sides, right? And fake news, or what you could also call infodemic, which includes fake news, is something that you can talk about. What do we do to control the narrative in such situations?
I think it's essential that media organizations approach coverage of not just the coronavirus pandemic, but any future public health emergency with utmost seriousness. And there is a the need to cover these events responsibly, but you also need to make investment. I think now any media organization that does not have a full-fledged science team, health reporters, in other words, in-house expertise, can approach and guide responsible coverage of events of this kind. I think really, there's enough money that's been spent on covering fashion or all kinds of other things in their time. And it's impossible to think of media doing their job without having on their roll access to qualified journalists who can cut separate wheat from the chaff.
Talking about cutting, we're almost losing you a bit over there with the connection, but hopefully it comes through. But I hear what you're saying. You're talking about more investment on the one hand by media organizations, to really make sure that journalists have enough to report on whatever issues that they have to. And quickly, we cannot ignore that social media has played a role in all of this, right? When you talk about politicians getting their message across with the statement you just made. But we as journalists could also then take advantage of these same social media platforms to get out our information. Is that right?
Well, social media has been a great force multiplier for the media, and particularly for small media organizations. Right? We have been able to have an influence and reach much greater than our financial resources would otherwise allow, and that's all thanks to social media. I should also say that this social media is also an important source of information. People should know that during pandemic first phase of the second wave in India, people at large were able to use social media to seek help, to seek assistance, medical support, critically short for them. And this is also a very, very important function of social media. But as journalists, you have to approach social media, particularly information that you with a great deal of responsibility.
Okay, I think we'll end on that words, or those words that we heard very clearly there. Responsibility, that is key. Apologies, the link hasn't been the best, so you've been breaking a bit. But I think all those listening and watching obviously have gotten the point. It's challenging times. COVID-19, a pandemic, fake news all over the place, misinformation, disinformation, and journalists have that responsibility to now more than ever, to do their job properly, to counter all of these negativity when it comes to information out there. Thank you very much for your time. I've been speaking to Siddarth Varadarajan, who's the director of The Wire. That's an Indian digital news portal for independent journalism. He's also a recipient of DW's Freedom of Speech Award for outstanding commitment to human rights and freedom of expression in the media. Hopefully we'll have the chance to talk some other time. Thanks a lot for your time.